thank you very much for coming to the guest lecture by Professor Dai of the University of UB. Professor Dai will talk in a minute about China's ongoing reforms and what it would mean to the Sino-British relationships, which of course reflects well the presentations we had over the last years by mainly British colleagues. Just a few weeks ago with Lord Marmon being very excited about China's prospect for the UK and how China could actually be helping the UK developing further and increasing the economic growth of the UK. And he was more excited about China than he was about India, despite being on the Commonwealth Business Council. Similarly, Andrew Moody, chief correspondent from China Daily, mentioned last week in a business breakfast at Leeds that he thought that the UK could be particularly well positioned to help China in its current growth prospects because of the service industries the UK is strong in. And therefore the UK could be better than Germany be positioned in developing China. I tend to be basically on that point. Other colleagues we had speaking at Leeds over the last year included Joe Stadler, who was extremely critical of China because he looked at China in comparison to Southeast Asia and East Asia, and how those countries have developed over the last 5 decades. So he compared China to South Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, and how they have developed, what kind of progression they have made over the years, and what that could mean to China. And he was in particular critical about things like corruption in China, institutional corruption, institutional changes, and how this could be developed, how this has to change. It would be interesting, especially on corruption, EU perspective, because just today came another tweet that a high official from China's state grid has been found potentially guilty of looking into black funds and other aspects. Another high official, of course, of last month as well. The other question, of course, in connection with reforms is why would we need any further reforms with China, within the Chinese context? Even though Joe Stadler has been very critical, we had, of course, last week a revision in predictions of China's economic growth by the World Bank indicating that China could be the largest economy in purchasing power parity terms by the end of this year. China is already a significant trading partner. China is a significant investor in other countries. Just bought recently House of Fraser's. What are the indications that China needs to reform? A recent study by the economists, or purported by the economists, suggests that 60%, more than 60% of Chinese citizens are environmentalists. You may not see this when you go to Beijing, but they're predictably environmentalists. So from this perspective, there's kind of movement in this direction. So it would be interesting to see in which directions, in which areas we think reforms would be needed. And I think that's where you come in, and what it then would mean to the UK. In particular, when we think about the UK's prospect of increasing exports, doubling exports by 2020, well, how does this work out? How does it work out in terms of international relations? And I know we've got colleagues here from international relations, in terms of, if you like, the power balances shifting between China and the UK and moving into other directions, or are they changing at all? And how this works into this kind of context. But I'll stop here, because you're not here to hear me, but Professor Dai. So please welcome Professor Dai.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And it's my great honor to visit University of Leeds, and it's also my great honor to speak here as a professor from University of International Business Economics, which is the counterpart, have close cooperation relationships with our University of Leeds. And thank you, Professor Henry. And I know many famous figures professors from this university are here, including Professor Mozui and Professor Higham, right? And other colleagues. And so I should especially express my thanks to the professors, to our colleagues of business school, to our colleagues of the Business Confucius Institute of Leeds. And I hope we have, together, we can promote our cooperation. And today, I'll touch upon some points about the new round reform in China, because not long ago, the Communist Party of China has had a very important meeting. That is the meeting of the third plenum session of the Communist Party of China. And China's situation, right? It is just the policy-making process is that the party meeting will initiate the most important outlines or guidelines for political and economic activities of the whole society. And then the government will try to implement or to outline, to formulate, detailed policies and measures to implement the policy or political, requirement of the whole society. So it is important for us to know, if we want to know China better, it is important for us to know that conference or the third plenum session better, because it is, I do think that it is the most important conference after the 18th National Conference of CPC, because a total, manual of reform was outlined or formulated in such a session. And I attached three main points. And the first is that why China should or would have such a, overall or comprehensive reform in China as a background. The second, I would like to go some detail, the key points or key findings, which I do think that will be very important for us to understand such a round reform. And then some, general ideas about, my own ideas about the impacts that would be brought about by such a reform in China. And the overall background of such a round reform is that because the situation or the overall national strength has been changed in China. China has been striding forward rapidly in the past 30 years. And China now is the second GDP, ranked second globally economy. And also the commodity trade ranks first in the global economy. And in such a process, China's society has changed dramatically. We call it, as pointed out by the Communist Party leader, as the 5 modernizations. First is the, industrialization. Second is the, urbanization. and industrialization and informalization or modernization through information technology and modernization, right? And the overall national strengths have been growing fast, right? China, more than half of China's population has been urbanized. That's a great change to China. Because after the so-called Cultural Revolution in 1970s, China's urban population was just more than 17% of the whole population. But now, half of the Chinese people are urbanized. That is perhaps the most important change in Chinese history. However, problems have been harassing China all along the reform process, which I would mention later, right? Economically, China, as the process of reform goes on, China met top problems that, according to the leaders of CPC, there should be reform. That to say policies and measures should be initiated to meet the challenges. First, that the China's model of development is at a high cost of environment and resources. It is said that it is estimated that China consumed 70% of cement and 80% of steel in the whole world. And Beijing now is among the most polluted cities in the world. And now in Beijing, we only, in the past we were afraid of wind because the wind was mixed with sand. But now we are welcoming wind because the wind will blow the polluted dust away. That is serious in China. And referring to the industrial structure, it also has deficiencies. China's products is often at the low value, end, at the end of the value, and extraordinarily expanded, but highly duplicated, especially for the medium and small-sized enterprises. They will duplicate each other. And for China, why it has been in the rapid process of development, why it is a fragile development model, as for my opinion. As for me personally, I think this is because China has a very special, I call it state capitalism, or the business linkages with government. So as for SOEs, or those so-called state-owned and owned enterprises, they are so strong. But in the meanwhile, lack competitiveness compared with their counterparts in the global economy. And it is, as for the medium and small-sized enterprises, the most serious problem is that they lacked innovation, or they cannot innovate in terms of management, in terms of technology, in terms of cooperation. That is perhaps the problem that embarrassed the small and medium-sized enterprises, business. And after so many years of development, and China's economy, we call it, we have structural problems embodied in the two kinds of imbalance. The first imbalance is that the investment and the consumption gauges is enlarging between those two factors, right? It is estimated the fixed asset investment increased sixfold from 2003 to 2011. Gross investment was 48.6% of GDP in 2011 versus 41% in 2005. That is to say, gross investment grew higher than the speed of GDP. But in the meanwhile, on the contrary, house consumption has kept in a low level, and the share of GDP of the household consumption is declining. Consumption was 35% of GDP in 2010, less than that 38.8% in 2005. This kinds of imbalance shows that China's economic development has been mainly relying on investment, not consumption. That is perhaps the first structural problem for China. That is the total investment increase. The diagram shows the increase, right? You can notice, right? Here, though the investment went down, right, relatively in 2011, but the total investment has been keeping going on. In 2011, China's total fixed asset is 31,000, right? 1,022 billion, right? I'm not, so skillful to count in English, right? But it is so high. And what does it imply in the gauges or the imbalance between investment and consumption? That means China's economic development is highly reliant on exports and the foreign market because its own domestic market has not been stimulated or energized, mobilized, right? And it also means that the fixed asset increasement means that the Chinese government has been always supporting the SOEs to invest, right? But the growth of SOE has gone contrary to its own, designated roles by the party. Because as early as in 2003, the central government has designed a role for so-called SOEs, because SOEs were regarded as to be the key roles for the key fields of national economy, or the lifeline for Commonwealth, for national economy of China. They should not compete with small and medium-sized enterprises in the most profitable area, economic area in China, right? That also means that there is a close collusion between the government and the business, right? The other imbalance is the state and the citizen or residents' wealth disparity, right? And in the long run, China has implemented a preferential resource location system to the SOEs, to government branches, especially those people within the system, work in the system. But the majority of the common residents' wealth still kept a low growth rate. You can see government income growth was twice the GDP growth. That is to say, the income of the government, including the fiscal, mainly the fiscal income, was twice the rabbits compared with the growth of residents' wealth, residents' income growth. The state capital from 2005 to 2009 grew 10.5% annually, faster than or twice the speed of the growth of GDP. Right? That is the two kinds of imbalance. The first imbalance is the consumption and investment. The other is the state wealth versus the residents' wealth. And this kind of capitalism also shows its deficiencies in other aspects. Because China's development is highly dependent on the entrepreneurial government. The government played a role of entrepreneurship to support SOEs and other businesses. The state capitalism has caused serious problems. First is the rampant corruption, because the collusion between business and the government. The second is that the severe disparities between different people, different regions, the hinterland and the coast areas, the west and the East. The few people, the large amount of population, and even in same profession and the same industries, same business, there are serious disparities among the people, among the different parts. So, in such a situation, it was very clear for the Chinese leaders, even the former generation of leaders, they were clear about this. They were clear about the situation. But it is most important whether they can be determined. They can take, real measures, or they can have the wisdom to face the challenges and deal with the problems, right? Now, in such a situation, the government has to fight in two fronts. First is that to combat corruption because of the collusion between government and the business. The other is that the government has to oppress social resent, social wrath, uncompliance, complaint, unrest in the society. Because the Gini, it's just a rate is very high in China. Disparity, serious disparities between rich people and the large population of the poor, right? And politically, such a development mode, of course, has brought about great impacts politically and socially, even culturally, in China. And there even emerged a strong sense of relative deprivation. In the 1980s, in the last century, common people were satisfied because the reform had only started. The reform bring about interest for all the people in China. But after 20 years of reform, the reform was increasingly preferential to some people, not the most population, most part of the population. So the strong sense of relative deprivation and also constant clashes between security forces, for example, government officials and policemen, citizens, even violence happened in China's society. So this is one hand. On the other hand, in order to keep the social stability, China has to put more, money into such a process of maintaining social state and political stability. So there even emerged a new vicious cycle. That is to say, on the one way, because of the disparities, because of the problems caused by the development mode in China, and more resentment, more complaint and social unrest would occur. On the other hand, the party and the government have to take measures, sometimes including very serious violent measures to press to keep the stability, basic stability for the development, right? But new opportunities eventually came because for the older generation, on one way, perhaps they were reluctant. On the other way, perhaps they did not have such a determination in the last few years of their position. A new generation of leaders had no way to go but to shoulder the responsibilities to solve the problem, remain in the Chinese society. This is often expressed by the Chinese leaders as the challenge means opportunity. So the new generation of the leaders would like to take such a chance of opportunity to reform. You know, President Xi Jinping has a very prestigious background because he was from a red family. His father was among the leaders of the first generation. This is perhaps one of the factor of legitimation for President Xi to move the reform. So in such a background, the 18th National Congress of CPC has indicated a willingness to undergo significant reform to moving forward, right? Just as I mentioned, politically, disparities and social roles, social, resentment, and economically, the increasing disparities between the rich and the poor, and so many questions, tough problems such as environment and the fragile economic structure in China, and also culturally and socially. China was now more secularized, and people have a strong sense of profit maximization, right, to become rich. Ideology, the function of ideology does not work now. Ideology has been in the process of deteriorating. It cannot keep people. It cannot give people norms, guide people's conduct. And usually, when we have a meeting, we speak a very official language or discourse. And after that, we speak in another way. We speak another kind of language. And you have to, there's nowhere to mix or to combine or to integrate the two kinds of language, even language system or discourse system. And previously China, the ideology functioned well in the so-called socialist system. But now, the function has deteriorated, and the people has less trust with each other. The social trust has also deteriorated among the common people. Nobody believes others. That's most serious in China now. So, on the one way, the new leaders should encounter or confront such tough problems of economic politics. On the other way, we have to rebuild the society the societal, we call it societal management or societal building in China. Actually, it is a part of nation-state building. I refer to it, it is a part of a nation-state building. We should learn to have a new culture, a new points of view of value in China. We need a new societal or social structure in China that can integrate all the ideas of Chinese together. That is perhaps the more serious challenge for the new generation. That is why we lay greater emphasis on the so-called societal building or social management in China. Why we lay emphasis on the so-called cultural building and the environmental civilization in China. So, against such a background, the third plenum session has initiated a comprehensive strategy and modes for the coming reform, touching upon areas of critical needs in China. First is that the necessity and urgency of reform has been clearly identified and clearly stated in the resolution, in the report of the third plenum session of CPC. And the key points, the key findings in that plenum, I should say the essence of the conference is to push development through reform. Often we call it development motivated or mobilized by reform, 以改革促发展, because it is thought the most important experience for China's development. That to say, to mobilize development through reform. Reform is the dynamic for China's progress. It is very clear for the new generation. But on the other hand, it is very clear for the new generation of leaders because the new round of reform will touch upon the core fields of our economic and political system, including SOEs, including the financial system, including the land resource system. And we call it the key factors of productivity and the key structure of the economy system would be reformed. So it will meet more challenges, even, resistance from within the party as well as outside the party. That is called deep water and fortified positions, 就是改革的深水区，攻坚战 in Chinese. So it is aimed at modernizing the national economy through investment in people. So I just mentioned the two gauges, two imbalance. The first, China should rely on its economic development on its own domestic market. In the past, China has a very, obvious characteristic of development, relying on exportation, international trade, or foreign market. But now we have a large market in China. We should stimulate. We should make it work. And it also means this round of reform will result in systemic economic and political impacts, because in the process of realignment of interests, the change of the structures of economics, different people's interests will be touched. That is, in the word of the leaders, is the pulling one hair, and the whole body will be affected. That is the 牵一发而动全身. That means the comprehensive and the severity of the reform in China. Perhaps it will meet more resistance because the reform now goes into the interests of the official system and the political regime. But, however, we have no choice but to meet the challenges. And according to the past experiences, even China could still keep a stable, social order if the leaders of the new generation really are seriously determined to reform. I do think, personally, the plan is a workable plan, the reform plan. And it will work. It will work. You see, the third plenary session of the 18th Congress of CPC, they have put forward a very comprehensive manual of reform. Addressing in the four general fields. First is the economic field. Second, politically. Third is social and people's livelihood and the leadership system. That is the diversified varieties of reform area. First is the rural land, the farmers' property. Because in the past, the land of the farmers were namely collective. Farmers had no, rights to sell, buy land, because the land was collectively owned. If the land would be in the market to transfer or to through a circulation process, then the farmers need a representative. The representative usually to be the so-called 村长 or the leader of the villages. We call administrative villages. Individual farmer had no right to circulate or trade their land. But now, new policies would be outlined. And it is the purpose of the land reform is that to protect farmers' right, to stimulate rural in development, and to make a new market for land. But what measures, detailed measures, or what practical measures would be outlined in China has not been clear now. This perhaps will be through a process of testament, experiment at different localities in China. and scholars are now trying to make suggestions for the government. And they are starting what kinds of plan would work in such a reform. So, usually, land was regarded as the basis for social stability or for the political regime. It is the core interests of the farmers. Since states should protect the farmers in order to protect the regime, then you cannot change the land resource system. If would like to change the land resource system, that means you would perhaps change the basis for the political regime, for the political system. Because it was clearly described in our Constitution. Our political system was established on the basis of collectively owned and state-owned economies. And in the rural areas, if the new plan was implemented, then it means the greatest change in rural economic development, not only economically, but also, politically. So this is the core reform in the rural areas. And the other core factor or the core interest of the state is the financial and the banking system. And financial and banking system usually was regarded as the lifeline for national economy. But now, new policies would be outlined, would be made out. The purpose is to break monopoly of the so-called the 4 biggest banks in China, provide financial support for the small and medium-sized business. In the past 10 years, increasingly, small and medium-sized business found it difficult to get loans from our bank system, from banks. No financial organization could afford loans and money for the development of the for the new business, for the smaller size and medium-sized business. That is to loosen control of the financial system and to try to get access for the establishment of joint stock and the private banks. That will be the very serious change in China's economic structure. The third is that the public facilities and the essential productive factors, right? The purpose is to break a monopoly of the SOEs to mobilize in the role of market resource allocation. Because in the past, the public facilities such as electricity, communication, transportation, the railway was in the hand of the state government. Now, perhaps there will go through a process of marketization and even privatization, right? And then fiscal system. In the past, China has no inheritance system, but now we would like to initiate a new inheritance tax system and adjusting property tax. The purpose is to bridge social gaps, promoting social fairness, because the rich people actually get too much. And economically, there's another policy is to establish Shanghai Free Trade Zone. It is not only for Shanghai, but the real purpose is to make some experiment and to cast pressure for other localities in China. That is called competition among governments, different levels of government in China. We need a new kind of competition. If new policies and measures had been implemented in Shanghai, other provinces would follow their examples. That is very important. So we can understand such a Shanghai Free Trade Zone established in not only just from its name. And politically, the government functions is to reduce largely the approval procedure and to make the government function transfer 就转变 we call 转变政府职能。We are now advocating the idea of a service government. That is to say, China's government should be transferred from an entrepreneurial government to a service government, play its own roles, instead playing the roles of business. We hope the measures would work, but whether they can work will depend. It will depend on whether government take it seriously to reform itself. Now, the party system is there to strengthen the discipline committee, discipline committee. Because in the past, the disciplinary committee of CPC was just in the hand of the same level committee, party committee. It is not vertically led, organized by the upper level CPC committee. So even if we had such a disciplinary committee, they seldom could work on the same level officials. But now, the discipline committee of various varieties of levels of party had been vertically organized. So their power would be strengthened in the future. This measure is to strengthen the power of the strength of anti-corruption, to build a clean government. Now, the legislative and the judicial system reform. First is that to enhancing the role of the legislative, that is the National Congress of People. And then unifying trial and sentence. Yesterday I talked with Professor Henry, and in China, it is very strange that the judge had the power to trial, but no power to sentence. So in China, a judge cannot declare that somebody would be sentenced some penalty. Usually we declare that after our trial, we'll choose a date to declare, to claim your penalties or your punishment. That is to say, the judge only has the power of trial, no power of sentence. But now we would like to unify the two power together. So it is to strengthen legislation promoting social justice and the social, concerning social and people's livelihood, and a new social security system and labor system would be established. The main is to integrate the social security system because in China, different localities implemented different social security levels or create higher standard. But now we hope a national-wide security level occurs in China to encourage entrepreneurship, to promote postpone retirement, 延迟退休, that to say, now China professors in China like me will have to retire at the age of 60. Then this age will be changed. This is also to promote social fairness, meet the challenges of aged society. Family planning, change one child family plan. School test system, college entrance exam system will be changed, reformed. And enhance labor pool, ameliorating educational resource. China now is we call it a big educational state, but not a strong state. We are wondering, we have so many good students, why we cannot make them to be the most talented scientists, including social scientists, right? And the societal management is changing NGO registration system. In the past, NGOs have to be registered after an official organization. But now this system would be changed. Government buying service system. This is to promote social development and build so-called harmonious society. And in order to, to promote a comprehensive manual of reform, the CPC strengthened its own leadership. Now, 3 very important groups have been established. First is the leading group of reform. The second is the national security group. The third is that internet security group, with Xi Jinping as the heads, not the head, but the heads of all the 3 groups. That to say, that means President Xi was determined, has a strong determination to push the next round of reform to meet the challenges, right? And this is what I generalized from the resolution, the report of the third plenum session of the 18th National Congress of CPC, and not copy others, but I generalize the most important points of the reform. Positive results may be produced, anyhow risks and uncertainty would occur if we could not manage the situation well. For China, I'm a political scientist. I often talk with my students. Nobody can, no nation state can become the strongest state in the world if it has not finished the process of nation state building. China now has not finished the process of nation state, even nation state building, because we have Taiwan problem, Tibet problem, and even serious problem domestically. And this would be a very important, predicament harassing China in the future. And on the other hand, China's development has aroused serious anxieties and uneasiness from our neighboring countries, and even in other parts of the world. And to what extent and what rational role China will play in the future, and in what way and what policies and what strategies would China use to meet its challenges, really is a test for not only for the leaders, but also for the people, especially for the so-called scholars, or those people who are perhaps about the mid and the level of the society, the social elites, to consider, right? The plan is overall. The plan is a good plan, personally I think. But whether that could be implemented well, that is really a problem. The plan administration has about more than half a year has passed. And now the core areas of reform, the key points of the reform, as far as I know, have not touched. For example, the land resource system, how to reform it. We have no detailed plan. We have less experiment. We have less experience how to make it marketized, circulated. And for example, social overall comprehensive nationwide social security system. How much money or what kinds of integrated policies China need to cover such a plan? Still, we have no ideas about that, including many points. Now we need detailed, rational, detailed, differentiated plan for the overall reform. Of course, China will step into another round of reform. We do hope that China would promote this round of reform as previously it has done, peacefully, stably, and make contribution to the outside world, to the foreign markets, to our counterparts, including UK, the market of UK, the people of UK, right? So, for Great Britain, China's reform in the past used to be an opportunity. For example, still more cooperation in the arena of education, in finance, in science and technology, and in cultural exchange would occur. It is good news to our counterparts of UK. But on the other hand, China and the UK still, we have different social system, political system, point of view of values, right? And especially in the fields of, for example, human rights, right? Ideology. We have differences. We cannot be the same. First, we should acknowledge such differences. The only way is cooperation. I do think it mutual understanding and mutual cooperation would be the most important points for China and the UK. So China need progress politically, socially, and for the Sino-British relations, our counterparts of UK, you need patience, you need goodwill, you need understanding. First, wait. You need time. We should wait. Not only our UK friends need to wait. China, ourselves, we are waiting. Well, we are really waiting. The new policies, new direction, the clear direction. Now we are, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still puzzled in the various reform manuals I mentioned now, because I'm not so clear. Still, for me, I'm not clear what plans and what strategies would be worked out. Now in China, the only, obvious or clearly, or you can feel is that the anti-corruption stress is increasingly stronger in China, because each day, each month, nearly each day, we'll have officials kicked out or arrested, kicked out from his position or abused. That is clear. Perhaps from such a, this is perhaps a kind of signal that we can, at least we know that our party and the government has, strong or firm determination to promote the reform. So, for our Chinese self, we still need patience, right? So, that is what I would like to introduce to you, and all the information. Some part is that what I generalized from others. The other part is that what I personally studied, because I was eager, I have been eager to know what will go in the new round of reform, what the direction in China would be led by the new generation. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for your patience. Any questions? Thank you very much.